sector, and it's really a huge shift in IT. You think about IT went from mainframe, client server, and now it's cloud, right? So that's a huge shift in IT, and it's probably a bigger shift than people realize at this point. It's still a very small sector, and with an excellent panel of the cloud pioneers, I'll call them. And really, we got great big companies, Xerox, and some of the emerging cloud companies. There's also a VC on the panel, so it's a good mix. So I think one thing I'd like to say is that the IDC predicts spending on hardware, software, and service in the cloud computing systems alone will be $60 billion this year. That's a huge number, $60 billion. So it's eventually going to be the entire IT sector. That's my prediction. But right now, it's very, very early. I think it's, you think about cloud and what is cloud, and these guys are not going to kill me for my definition of cloud. But basically, at a very simple level, if you have a server by your desk, you've got stuff there, right? And then cloud is you've got a server somewhere else with your stuff there. It's a very simple definition. And we're going to get a little more detailed than that and go into hypervisors. So, yeah, exactly. We got hypervisor talk and everything else, so you won't be disappointed. But and you think about enterprise, instead of their stuff in their data center, they have stuff in some other data center, right? It's not that easy, but it's a good way to conceptualize. So I've got a question. How many people here use the cloud personally? Okay, that's a good portion. Yeah, so you look at Microsoft Exchange for email, Google email, Gmail. You look at Picasa for photos. The cloud for personal use is fantastic. We're talking more on the enterprise level today, and how enterprises are actually leveraging the cloud. And the real base of the panel is the next generation of cloud. So we're seeing really early cloud right now. What's going to be the future of the cloud? And hopefully our panel can answer that question. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Lori. I'll stay here just one second. So now I'd like to actually have the panelists introduce themselves. And why don't we start with Andrew?
Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Davis. I'm the CEO of Gauge Networks, a cloud communications provider. So I'm one level of depth more than a cloud computing provider, but you'll see hopefully through the evening the definition of a cloud communication provider is a bit like an application within the cloud. The company makes communications for global companies, multi-site companies, easier, faster, more reliable by using the cloud. And that is the foundation of the company. Do you want me to go into a bit of background on me? Or is that...
Yeah, just give like a 5-minute overview. Fantastic.
So I have sort of been involved in the cloud for quite some time, in that my first startup was measuring the speed of the internet back in 1996. And that startup, of course, nowadays would be called measuring the speed of the cloud. It doesn't really make sense. And as that changed, there were some really fundamental shifts that enabled the cloud to happen. And that's the journey I've been on, and particularly in the 2000, involved in web hosting, traditional data center hosting, which has become what everybody now calls the cloud. And I think the definition of how it's all mixed up with virtualization, cloud, computing, hosting, ASPs, for some of you remember that, is going to be the topic of tonight. And hopefully we can get rid of just the marketing term of cloud and actually understand the real business values that drive that shift of that server or multiple servers up into the cloud. Because by doing that, you enable all sorts of business benefits, disaster recovery being probably a classic one that you can do by moving upstream. So now, 5 years on from doing cloud communications with Gauge Networks, we offer services globally. We sell into the 500 to 1,000 seat enterprise, high SME type marketplace, and deliver services, business-grade telephony, business-grade contact centers for routing calls globally, and high-definition video conferencing that works. I stress that works because traditionally video conferencing, the bane of it has been it doesn't work properly, but now with a cloud service, I can announce it does. So I'll pass it over to Joe.
Good evening. My name is Joe Birding. I'm with Xerox Corporation. I'm the Vice President of our Cloud Services Group. So I work with our corporate customers, primarily Fortune 500 customers, on helping them move their applications from traditional IT architectures to the cloud. Part of Xerox, Xerox actually acquired the company that I was part of, a company called Affiliated Computer Services, about 2 years ago. We were a Texas-based company that was about $6.5 billion in BPO, business process outsourcing, and IT outsourcing for our customers. And we have since been rebranded part of the Xerox family, and Xerox is moving very heavily into the services industry. Our team has been working on cloud for about 3 or 4 years, kind of with the I'll call it evolution of virtualization. In particular, VMware is kind of one of the more popular virtualization engines that we use. And we have developed a set of services for our customers around cloud, in particular around the data center and end user experience. My background is I started my career out of school at IBM and actually worked on probably the first, I'll call it cloud-like thing, which was the mainframe. Believe it or not, the mainframe was diced up into many different pieces and sold in timeshare, which if you really look at it, even though the technology is different, some of the attributes are different, it really did have a cloud-like feel when you look at it from an end user point of view. So after that, I went on and did a stint at Dell for a few years, and then have been with Xerox for the last 8 years.
My name is David Roth. I'm the co-founder and CEO of an exciting startup named AppFirst. We actually just had our 30-year birthday this month. By the way, I think I was given this specific seat without a microphone because Ben knew that I talk a lot. So hopefully everybody in that far back seat can still hear what I'm saying. If I can, put up your hand. If you can. Okay, cool. I'll start off by giving you a quick background on myself and kind of the reverse of the other guys, and then I'll go into what AppFirst is about. And I think it will make sense, kind of comes together with what we're all talking about tonight. I've got approximately 25 years in the industry. I grew up in the large companies, as you mentioned, kind of starting off at IBM. That's also where I started out, but my division was sold off to 9X. And so I was there in the 80s and the 90s. I was at Microsoft until 95, and I've been a serial entrepreneur since 1995. This is my 5th startup. My companies are inside, past companies are inside HP, EMC, Fujitsu, some big names that many of you know. So this is our latest exciting venture. The last 2 startups were an automation company, that's what's inside HP, and also an application virtualization company that was a lot of the impetus of what I'll call private cloud in regards to, again, getting the flexibility of spinning up and down services and applications on demand on one common set of hardware and operating system. That's how my transition to what AppFirst is about and on this topic about clouds is I will throw out my bias right away. I've been at conferences where I sit next to somebody saying there's no such thing but anything but public clouds. Anything that's not a public cloud is not a cloud. And there's just religions that go into a lot of directions. I think it's absolutely clear there are public, private, and hybrid implementations. They all matter. They're all important. My company supports all of them, and I'll get into that in a sec. What does it mean then for it to be cloud beyond? I don't mean to just lower Ben's definition. It was a good start. But I think the thing I want to make sure is kind of clear out there is the earliest marketing pushes around cloud had a lot to do with saving money. This is going to be cheaper. How much money you can save? I promise you from the beginning to now, and the evolution is still on, saving, like the absolute total money savings is by itself not the #1 ticket. It's about business agility. The first person who started speaking talked about the business. What does it mean to your business? And first and foremost, that's what we should be asking all of us, we should be interacting on this conversation, is how does this help companies make or save money? And your choices about how you implement between thinking about public, private, and or some combination and hybrid is going to come down to what's best for your business, right? And we'll go into specifics on that depending on what all your questions are and where this goes. So like I said, I can talk a lot, and this all started before I even said what my company does. So AppFirst, because of my knowledge of building an automation company and a virtualization company, gave me the visibility across enterprises that folks don't have an inside-out view about what's really going on in their business-critical applications so that it can really ensure things run at their best all the time. Well, if you're going to try to get into these decisions about what can best run where, you actually have a lot of risk to mitigate, and that's really the business app first is in. We are all about the business risk and the systems risk, and we can help you solve the issues regarding getting into cloud and running at your best and getting the best business results from it. We're a software company, it's a software as a service, so we bet on the cloud ourselves and how we run. But at the same time, we actually ensure that we can answer all the questions with our software that folks have a hard time getting to the bottom of, that kind of came up in this marketing piece for coming here, which is how do I know which parts of my app can run where. I would even argue, actually it's kind of an adjustment on the marketing. A lot of people start off saying, what apps? I would argue, what part of my apps? You know, it's okay to have some subsystems or some part of an application be cloud-based while some other parts are not, and or some things need to be private while some things can be public. So again, we'll get into those in detail, but we're all about the success based on understanding the risks for business and systems.
I'll be quick. I'm Roger Krakoff. I would say I too was an IBMer, so obviously IBM bore the cloud. It was a frustrating place when I was there, however. My engagement and involvement in the cloud is relatively new compared to my colleagues up here. I came to the cloud about 1.5 years ago with a fellow who was supposed to be here tonight, Chris Greendale. Chris turned me on to the cloud by saying 2 words, or 3 words, it's going to be big. And he decided, because he has a heritage in service-led transformation companies. He was the co-founder of Cambridge Technology Partners, Breakaway Solutions, and then Glasshouse Communications. And all 3 of those companies were service companies focused on IT change waves. And he said to me, this cloud thing is going to be huge. So I said, well, maybe I should start a fund around it. I've been doing venture capital for a decade, all in the enterprise space. I raised some money, and I've been investing in cloud companies at a pretty aggressive pace. So I've done 11 investments in a year. I will say I got liquidity on my first investment in the 11 pool 6 times, and for government tax purposes, it was a year. So it's pretty exciting stuff. The thing that I want to impart about cloud is maybe 2 messages, and we'll get to the evening discussion. The first is, think of cloud just like a utility. And the way that the American economy was transformed when you could buy power, you didn't have to set up your own little power station, where it would be by some brook and it would be turning a wheel and it would store the energy somehow and transmit it. This is fundamentally providing on-demand, by the desired measure, by your rate of consumption, power. It happens to be called IT power or storage power, but it's power. The second thing is cloud is going to transform every aspect of technology and maybe most of our lives. So when I say most of our lives, most of the parts of our lives where we intersect with digital stuff, it's going to fundamentally shift how you and I do everything. And that's why it's exciting, and that's why I'm investing in it. So I'll stop there.
Well, I thank the panelists for improving upon my definition of the cloud. That was fantastic.
We've only just started, you know.
Sorry?
We've only just started.
So I'd like to go into questions for the panelists now, and then we'll have time for audience questions afterwards as well. So my first question is, let's look at the current state of the cloud, and I appreciate your comment on part of the apps. So what apps are being onboarded to cloud? We're all familiar with email and from a consumer perspective, but for enterprises, what are they onboarding now? Which apps?
Typically, what we're seeing most customers start on their cloud is to move what I'll call their test and development systems there. Those are the systems that have a lot of dynamic nature to them. So the workloads will shrink, and they're seasonal, or there's going to be a test cycle. There you can definitely take advantage of the economics of the cloud, because you only pay for what you use, as opposed to having a dedicated server sitting there idle while you're not testing. So that's what we're seeing most customers kind of start with. After that, I think email is one of the next logical things that they look at going to a cloud service. We've had some of our customers look at Google and also look at Office 365. That's Microsoft's offering around email. But others have wanted to do it with us, right, because of the security, and they didn't want to take it off premise, right? So those have been I'll call it the highway on to the on-ramp onto the cloud for most of the enterprise customers.
And for me, it's going to be cloud communications, and the big ones. You've got the big consumer ones out there in terms of Google and Google Voice and other voice applications, but the real future is the integration and marriage of voice and video, and the seamless usability of voice and video services from anywhere, any place, at any time, to be able to have a multi-party video conference from any device, be it mobile, desktop, Mac, PC, whatever it is, even clientless, that you can dial up anywhere on a multi-site company and communicate. Now, the key reason it's happening is because, as Roger said, it's a utility. And what's one of the key utilities in this very office? And it's called an old telephony PBX. And it sits in the corner somewhere in this office. And by moving that computer upstream into the data center, into the cloud, you enable all sorts of other initiatives to happen. That you can run a cloud communication service much better, more flexibly, and I could go on about all those benefits. So that to me, the communication services, voice and video, are the next wave beyond document sharing and email. And that, the investment going on from the players in Cisco, Polycom, Lifesize, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, of course, is enormous. And that's going to completely change. And for a lot of generation, of course, there's a whole generation that isn't in this audience, who, my children, who growing up with voice, with video, is completely natural. And that is all cloud-based, obviously, FaceTime.
Andrew, you just came out with an HD phone app. You want to go to that
Correct,
just 2 seconds?
Yeah, so we've got an HD phone app, and of course one of the beauties about being in the cloud is you can innovate faster. So by the innovation, one of the innovations that we've done is for 3 years now we've had high definition voice. And when you use high definition voice from the cloud, it is something to behold. It's actually a very different experience talking to people in high definition on a speakerphone and looking at them in high definition. And I have clients in the fashion industry who, not making this story up, in the shoe and garment, where they look at the thread in high definition on other continents. And that's all been enabled through cloud services. It's revolutionary.
It's very cool. So it's basically coming from that kind of stuff where my kids asking me to get on FaceTime and see my face when I'm on a business trip.
Every day I'm on the phone.
Yeah, so the extra thing I kind of would relate to your question goes back to what is the cloud then, right? So we've got IaaS, which is probably that first place people think of with Amazon and various public infrastructure.
Do you explain what that is?
Yeah, so infrastructure as a service is probably at the core of where we started, where Ben started to talk on the server being out there instead of just at your desk. So think of, again, the data centers being run remotely, handled independently, and gaining, as other members mentioned, a pay-per-use type model. And again, that's why the nice part is for certain applications that aren't running constantly all the time, there is savings to that, but also, the way to think about it also is CapEx versus OpEx. So spending to set up these big data centers or keeping them current and so forth versus how this is always handled for you. So that's what the infrastructure as a service guys are about, is they're thinking about CPU, memory, storage, all those aspects of compute. They really don't go higher than the operating system in regards to what they're going to take care of for you, but it's the OS down to all that infrastructure. And everything above that's your responsibility when you're dealing with the infrastructure as a service world, for the most part. The platform as a service, which is another core segment, is actually raising the stakes to a higher level, at the application level, that even at, minimally speaking, the development application level, to say, for Ruby development communities, they've got specific clouds just for them. Heroku, who's a part of my Salesforce, or NGR, are examples of those. Microsoft with Azure is in that game. But there's lists and lists of them, and if anyone wants kind of comprehensive info on this stuff, I'm happy to send things offline to anybody that comes up for a card later or whatever. But that's the platform as a service, and obviously for being at that development level, their support is going to go above all those systems and operations, operating system, but also to how the app performs and what they can deliver on that experience. And then the third example is SaaS, software as a service. And so when we gave examples earlier about productivity apps ranging from Exchange in the cloud to Google App Engine, not the Google App Engine, that would be more past, but things like the productivity apps in the cloud and so forth, those fit in there. But the other thing I would reinforce is what's successful and are people buying in a huge way on SaaS has been CRM. Salesforce.com was the first to $1 billion in that space. You've got beyond the CRM environment, which is huge. And by the way, it's more than the Salesforce automation. It's a whole slew of marketing and collaborative marketing and sales types of enablement. The other side is probably in a close second these days is HR. So the amount of folks that are leveraging companies like SuccessFactors, who's now been acquired for a huge sum to SAP, Workday, I mean, there's various other solutions, but HR is a big area. And probably the third one I throw out there to not go on forever is around data analytics. Big data has become a really big thing. How much it costs any of us in enterprises to pay our Oracle licenses and to support large-scale data solutions has really drastically changed with cloud computing and NoSQL technology, which is heavily open source, that is and also very heavily cloud-enabled. So there's some really rich business analytics and big data cloud solutions out there as well. So those are probably the three spaces I mentioned. And then kind of going to the private cloud statement, well, I think there's a lot of regulatory requirements that happen in certain industries where folks have wanted to establish their own type, their own capability of cloud, typically using open source versions of cloud computing like OpenStack that came out of Rackspace, and basically enable an internal corporate data center to be cloud, add, scale up, scale down, enable. And Eucalyptus is probably the next big name in that, which came out of Amazon. So again, I think when folks in finance, in healthcare, they felt more comfortable with getting the regulatory requirements handled behind their firewall, but they wanted scale up, scale down capabilities of private, at least parts of the architecture that way. Those are certain examples or certain industry segments that went private cloud. And I think a number of the big infrastructure service providers are beginning to offer private cloud alternatives that you go to them for. So that they'll host it for you in a basically an emulated private setting. It's still your data center that they handle for you. To still get your compliance taken care of. So.
Yeah, so it's worth noting that Eucalyptus just received $30 million in venture capital financing, which is impressive. You on that, Roger?
Eucalyptus?
No, just a general question. Which apps are going on in the cloud now?
I do, but I think we beat it up. So
okay, that's fine.
Sure.
Sure. You get the next question then, which is, there's some controversy out there about whether the whole IT department, all apps, all IT will just go in the cloud. And it's a little simplistic question because you've got private cloud, you've got public cloud, you've got hybrid. But what's your view on that?
So let me start from a slightly different response to come back to your question. There's a phrase that's being uttered around technology called the consumerization of IT. And I'm going to call on anybody who can tell me what that is, consumerization of IT.
It's on that.
Yeah, good.
Executives are bringing iPads in, and IT never knew that, or...
That's actually called BYOD. That's called BYOD, bring your own device. And that's driving IT professionals crazy because they got to support different operating systems, different form factors. But what I'm really talking about is you come to work and you say, you know what, this thing is slow. My computer at home, my Google search is so much faster. What's wrong with us? So they expect more. So that's driving a tremendous amount of innovation. The second thing is, because of the nature of the cloud, it doesn't cost a lot to get started. You don't have to charge to get in the market. And people say, well, we have a freemium model, which means I don't charge, but then I charge. We're trying to seed the market to get users. But what happens is IT loses control because David here says, well, I got my Salesforce account. Shh, don't tell anybody, because IT sucks. So I'm going to run my sales management platform on Salesforce. And then the next guy comes in and says, our HS system is terrible. I'm going to run on SuccessFactors. And so these organizations are being pulled dramatically into running cloud without knowing how to run cloud. So that's one huge dimension. The second is they're all out of money. The CEO has said to the CIO, look, I'm sorry, we have no more budget. In fact, I want to cut your budget because I need it over here. Marketing, sales, development, whatnot. So you're going to make do with less and give me more. So they're being driven to say, I got to try stuff and go on the cloud because it's my last trick. And worse, they say, I need to make my bonus because that's how I'm going to afford my country club and my big car. So they're now driving to the cloud. So you just take these two forces, consumer push or consumer driven, and the CIO saying, I need to get control, I need to make my bonus. That means everything's going to the cloud. Just simple human behavior.
Yeah, I would say if you look at the natural evolution of that, we're going to see more and more IT, or I'll call it business solution decisions being made out of the business units, right? So IT is not going to be the ones making those decisions. It's going to be the business. And I think IT becomes more of a governance, or here's our best practices, or here's our standards. And these things will be consumed as a service, either internally with some of their own internal IT staff and systems, or via a private cloud or a public cloud or a SaaS model or something like that. So I think IT is going to kind of, I'll say, lose a little bit of power in this whole thing, and they're going to become more of a facilitator and less of a, iron fist kind of organization. I don't know if you've seen that.
I think I'm going to bring in the dreaded word outsource, and this isn't new. What we're doing is outsourcing.
That's right.
That's all I'm selling, an outsourced service, and it's called cloud.
Right.
And you probably learn I'm pretty blunt in terms of my definitions, and so of course an IT department, the more they want to, they're going to keep outsourcing. If you're a very visionary IT department, you outsource a great deal. How many companies have their own power station? Of course, a few actually do, but not many. And so as this evolves, and as we see these mainstream applications across all different areas, every area you can possibly think of in IT directors are going to outsource more. And certainly my experience of selling cloud communications is it's the visionary IT directors who have actually trust the providers that move forward the fastest with it. They're the ones on the leading edge of it from an outsourcing point of view. Can I also just give my definition of private, public, and hybrid? Because so from a public cloud implementation is where you have the application hosted in a data center that is public facing. So it's available over the public internet. Private cloud implementation is where you have a company that runs their own private network, most typically an MPLS private mesh between 30 different offices, and what you do is you connect into that network from your data center. So you have a private connection into it, multi-point, typically in Europe, Asia, and the Americas, and you deliver that service exclusively through that private cloud. So you can't get access to that application through the internet. And as a cloud provider, you make your services available through the internet door or the private door, and that's the private cloud and the public cloud. The hybrid is where you have some of the application services are actually integrated. And a great example would be Microsoft with Active Directory and their cloud service, enabling a corporate to run an Active Directory within their own private network, but federate it to a Active Directory within a data center. And that's what's called hybrid cloud in my definitions.
Any disagreements?
No. One maybe quick little extension is we have something we offer our customers, which we call a multi-tenant private cloud, where basically we slice it up into their various network segments and make it available to them. It's kind of, some people call that public, but we call it a multi-tenant private cloud. So it's kind of a subset definition of private as you defined it.
The only other thing, I think what you're describing is a firewall aspect of one side or the other of the firewall, and I think that's cool. I also just still think if you leave it at that, and you could just take a series of virtual environments and call them clouds, and I'd argue that virtualization by itself doesn't create the cloud, it's one piece of it. So I think, because then I think if it's all about the virtualization, then it's about density. You're like, how much can you fit on a box? Versus if you're trying to figure out how quickly you get.
That's how you do it. That's a sort of different
thing. It's a means to an end, not the.
I mean, the reason for the private cloud from a mainstream large enterprise IT manager is primarily security. It's the fear that they want that application firewalled within their own private LAN. Now that, or WAN, and that is changing in that most of the services we provide are also enabled through the internet. So the marriage of these two is fast changing.
I do have one other quick.
Sure.
So back to your thing though about what does this mean to IT? We did a webinar on this recently, which is just making clear that there is an old IT and a new IT happening, and I think bottom line is the folks that looked at IT as a cost center and their jobs to ensure things, as they're broken, you fix them as fast as you can. I mean, it's kind of like a bad plumber experience, right? And the bottom line is you only kind of get called when somebody's got leaky plumbing and they're angry, and it's hard. You don't necessarily have a strategic relationship in the discussion. I actually believe that for decades there's been a shift going on and folks trying to make IT and business more aligned. What I hear from the folks that already are either to the new IT or are underway to it are that they basically don't talk about aligning IT goals and business goals. The strategic IT job is IT goals and business goals are the same. IT is there for the business. And so they look at it, that's what takes them to the direction that you said earlier about you strategically leverage outsourcing where it makes sense. You leverage the right SaaS apps for the right place, or use these resources in the right way. Finally, also I look at the new IT scenarios. I've both seen Fortune 50 size companies that have adopted the concept where they are a services organization inside the company to strategically drive value to the CEO and the investors and shareholders. And they're doing things like shared services as well, internally as well as externally, to figure out how to best get that value across. I know we try to keep the consumerization thing almost somewhat firewalled, although you gave a nice inroad to it, so I'm going to leverage it, is there's how many businesses now are huge that came off of the cloud. So Netflix became a really big company. All that got done off of Amazon, right? If you look at a company like Zynga, a multi-billion-dollar company in gaming, how many volumes of Amazon instances they leveraged to keep up with their scale, which, even if it became more expensive at one point, it was still about the speed of how quickly they could keep up with the growth. So I do think we find in our company on the new exciting businesses, online gaming, e-commerce, and just in general software as a service shops that consider their apps their business. All the technical leaders of those companies have to think strategically and have to look at these things in a way where, they have to mitigate all these risks.
So let's talk about the risks. That's a good segue. So, everything is not sunny in the cloud, right? That's, a good statement. But, so what are the risks in the cloud besides, let's talk about security a little bit, but what are the growing pains for early adopters in the cloud?
I mean, if you as an I sell to IT directors. That's who you sell to, and you're outsourcing to them, and they're going to look at it from there are sort of 7 reasons I would say why you outsource to the cloud, and one is you're outsourcing it. 2, you're asking for a better end user experience. So you're an IT director, and you actually want a better end user experience. I don't want to bother with support is another reason. You want to integrate it into what you've got is another reason. You don't want to own it, spend the capital on it. You want to have flexible pricing and a utility model. So you want to scale as and when you need it. So any one of those, if you don't pick the right company, is a risk for you as an IT director. And if I don't, as a service provider, have my act together in all of those areas, if I don't offer a better user experience, if I don't offer scalability globally on multi-countries instantly, that's a risk, because the IT director is going, well, actually, I could have done that myself and actually turned on video conferencing myself. So if you don't have any one of those 7 things in order as a service provider, and therefore as the buyer, you're going to put yourself at risk. Bluntly.
I think where I'll start is visibility. So like we went from cloud to sun and this and that, but at the end of the day, the hardest thing to mitigate a risk on is what you can't see and what you don't know. So as you made the right point about decide what you're going to do, what needs to be outsourced first and foremost, and what you're trying to get leverage on, and then work with the best ones in those categories. Part of what you're going to want to do is ensure how do you find who's best for what you're trying to do. So that means first and foremost you have to know where you're coming from. So let's say part of this includes taking something from what's existing and somehow migrating or running it in a new world. you better know exactly what it's used to getting, what success looks like, what's normal. And then once you get to the new world, then you can give that comparison. Well, let me give a quick example. If you've got a solution that's extremely network bandwidth intensive, it streams like crazy. Well, your video is a great example, right? You're going to look at your choices. Let's say you know what you're trying to do is take something that is an end-to-end app you own and build, but you want to leverage public cloud capabilities. Well, then what you're going to do is look at those public clouds and say, if I go up down the OSI stack, what are the strengths and weaknesses of those clouds in the case of you network? Is that going to be the bottleneck that kills me? My user experience is going to suck. The video is going to crawl. And it's because I chose a provider. So it just doesn't handle.
So give an example of a few providers.
Well, let me give you an example. This would be an area where I end up probably throwing some people under the bus by doing like this. That's okay. Well, they know where their challenges are. I mean, Amazon, for example, has some real significant problems on file I/O and on network. If you have an application that's not big on file I/O storage scenario, network obviously is where things are coming in and out of that pipe. Like when I mentioned the streaming of video, our business is heavily streaming of data. So we have very first-hand knowledge of multiple clouds, including them. So for example, App First, we're a multi-tier complex application that has to take, we're running in 70 countries. We have thousands, we have basically thousands upon thousands of servers, perhaps hundreds of customers coming our way constantly. So network could be a major bottleneck to us, right? And in the case of our scenario, we actually used our own product that I'm talking about to say, let's look at the top 8 brands in infrastructure to service and see where the strengths and weaknesses are at each part of the OSI stack on letting us down or not. We actually found out all the ones that were crossed off on our list for network, and Amazon was one of them. We're working with, right now, I'll give kudos to somebody that kicks butt in this area, SoftLayer. SoftLayer put a lot of money into automation. SoftLayer put a lot of money into an amazing network. It's really fast. And by the way, the price was great. So we were able to take something that wouldn't work in a number of public clouds, but in the case of SoftLayer, the performance is phenomenal. But if you don't know your data, even if it was running behind your firewall, you're not ready to be talking about how to hold an outsourcer to the test. So I actually kind of think that whatever lessons we've learned through the 70s and 80s and 90s and today about the best outsourced relationships are ones that you know how to manage. You can manage them if you actually have some clue to what you need them to do and how to hold them accountable to it. You need to have insight. So that's my thing. Is cutting through, getting visibility.
Not to pick on Amazon, but there's clearly been some public outages in the cloud, and there's security breaches occasionally. So security is still a concern for a lot of enterprises. And I guess the key question is back to my very simplistic example is, how many times does your server get hacked by your desk versus the server in the cloud? And I guess enterprise have a similar metric. Is that a good way to look at it, or is it too simplistic?
Well, the one thing to offer about security is that you have a whole modern architecture being built right now against thousands of people at SoftLayer or at Amazon or at Joyent or Rackspace who are all fanatical about best practices and modern practices of security. So while there will be hiccups or glitches, it will be nothing like what goes on. Like one IT person said, what really is the flaw in enterprise security is the server sitting in the closet. It's not properly protected. It's been there for 15 years. And somebody's got a backdoor, a way to violate the trap, and it's just being raided.
The angry worker or the one that left mad are typically your highest risks in your security scenarios. If you look at the raw numbers of enterprise security theft,
It's internal.
It's heavily internal. So that doesn't mean it doesn't mean to say that these things shouldn't be looked at. But I agree with what Roger said. And if you sit in some of these sessions with the folks responsible for security, the CSOs of these companies, like Terramark was one who was acquired by Verizon. Right. I mean, there's oozes of those data centers. I mean, the retina scanners, the details of the amount of security, physical, even less alone how technology is secure between your locations, your customers, and them. There's a lot of good answers.
So they have more Uzis than you would have on premise. Is that the idea?
I want to see more Uzis in Israel.
But going back to Ben's question about issues or challenges, so you just have to acknowledge that the cloud is still young, and organizations are learning how to deal with it. So the idea of organizational change and how to re-engineer, re-architect my enterprise is really critical. Cloud TP, just do another plug, throw in my investments, they're going to be here. They're about change and change management. helping you think through the implications of moving to the cloud. Some things are really simple, like if we're running all these servers in the cloud, do we know what we're spending? Do we know if we forgot to turn them off? There's a company that I was talking to the other day, they enterprise, they ran a bunch of servers all weekend long in Amazon. It cost me $8,000. They go, my God, that's a lot of servers, by the way. They had no idea. So you're just catching up and building this fabric where the things you know how to do today when it was in your data center, you've got to learn how to do when it's outside your data center.
Yeah, one of the things that we see in Fortune 500 type companies, public companies, have security audits that they need to go through. And these are really around controls, IT controls, right? So do you have change management? When you make a change to one of your systems, do you have an audit log that can show how that change was done? As you move to the cloud, you need to make sure that those solutions, if they're running business critical systems that run finance or critical corporate information, that they comply with those particular standards that you have to meet. You have PCI, right, which is the thing that's done for retail. You have transactions, credit card information. You need to make sure your provider has a PCI compliant solution. So I agree with your thought about having a trusted advisor there to help you, someone who's done it for other companies, maybe seen these things a few times. The fact that companies, this is kind of a once-in-a-generational evolution, get some outside help, all right? But don't be afraid to move. That's the other piece that we have seen some companies just frozen by saying, I'll wait for it to mature. And you're going to miss the benefits of the cloud for your organization, because it does give you that agility that if you don't bring that to the organization, you're going to be left behind as a business.
I'll give you a real example of a risk of a contract that I signed a couple of years ago. It was with a big global luxury brand retailer. And the contract for a wide variety of services sailed through. Didn't really ask call rates and the sort of utility pricing. It was like, yeah. The bit that got the contract for weeks was all to do with the encryption of the call recordings, because they had high net worth individuals calling in and they didn't want our staff or their staff to be able to listen to, dare I say, Victoria Beckham or a film star at one for PCI compliance, credit card information, unlikely to have left it, but more to do with just access to that stuff. Now, I have to say that there are some bad cloud providers out there that switch on these services and don't have the compliance and the processes in place, and they're the bad apples of our industry who have given us a bad name 4 or 5 years ago, dare I say it, in 2001, 2005, as we grew up. Mm-hmm. But those risks still are there today. They're very real, and they exist.
I think one of the things, I'll plug back again for like the CTP or Quiroz and so forth, anybody in the services spot, the advisor, is that one thing that doesn't change though is people, process, technology. The technology by itself isn't just this golden ticket. And even though like people talk about that IT story of where, hey, the department just go quickly turn things on or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be shooting first and thinking about it later. So I think overall, going about things in a way that you, on the people process side, think about, what are your failover strategies? Is your app architecture set up right across potentially multiple data centers if need be? That's why, like, even when Amazon gets a black eye here or there in some of those write-ups, was all of it an Amazon issue, or how many folks that were the angriest actually could look in the mirror and say, we should have had our people and process areas planning better to mitigate risk?
Well, that's why consulting companies are still very valuable in the space, because it is a brand new space, there's no question. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about mergers and acquisitions, which is near and dear to my heart since that's what I do every day for a living. What do you guys think about Instagram and that acquisition? Was it a cloud company?
So I was horrified, like a bunch of my colleagues in the hacker space, because if anybody's been, I'm sure many people have, to University of Palo Alto, I guarantee you there are 30 teams sitting there going, well, we got Instagram and Schminstagram and Crinstagram, because they're all going to do a V2. Like the fact is, it was Zuckerberg who has controls, we all know, of Facebook. Knee-jerk reaction about wanting to respond to a couple of things he saw in the market. But I thought it was so audacious that this kid, and he was a kid, said, we're worth $2 billion. No shipping, well, they have product, but no revenue generating product.
Zero revenue.
Zero revenue. So you know, what you calculate your P's and multiples and that way.
It's infinite, actually.
Yeah.
So it was terrible. It was just terrible for the industry at large. So.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I mean, the reason why companies sell for multiples is when you can leverage their scale and that internet dream, taking a platform and very quickly getting scale and revenues based upon this platform and selling it to 100,000 people. And I thought the deal with Instagram was going to be where Facebook would monetize it in some way across all of their billion users. But I saw today that they're trying to keep it separate, whatever that means. And so that goes against the whole scale argument. So I think it will be its first black mark.
Is this the beginning of a bubble, you think? Or,
Yeah, that's the question.
I mean, are we on the cusp of it?
Well, you know, the problem is in the industry is that cloud is so hot now, it reminds me of the dot-com era, which when cloud hits the company.
It's a social company. It's really not a cloud company. Groupon, I think, is going to be the poster child for the bubble burst. Because there's no barriers to entry, there's no technology. They spend more money than they take in. It's a terrible business.
They restate revenues?
Right. The guy waves his arms.
Three times.
New accounting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but again, if you look at, I think everything you're bringing up is there's so much about the Groupon business that is an antithesis to the cloud business. It's extremely human capital intensive. They're putting massive bodies in regionalized locations.
Local sales force.
Local sales
Right.
forces.
Right.
I mean, I remember being in places in conferences and so forth where folks look at me like, 70 countries when we raised, less than $6.5 million in a few years. And it's like, this is cloud, that is SaaS. That is the fact that people can find you easily, work with you easily, and that was before we hired a first salesperson. So
The scalability is key.
yeah, my comment out generally, I mean, I know there's some strong opinions about, and actually I'm not even, don't necessarily, my only part about this is I find it interesting reading to just see what Zuckerberg's doing, and definitely if it's fair or not, or what goes on with it, still makes for interesting reading about what that founder described as the road to his because by the way, obviously this isn't $1 billion, right? This is worth much more than $1 billion because it's a cash stock deal. And this is a pre-IPO Facebook.
The stock goes up, and
So I mean, without being as financially smart as him, I'd still guess that, or for either one of you, I still think this is a potentially massive deal, even bigger than $1 billion. I think the word bubble started over on the
Yeah,
side.
but the question, I guess the question back to traditional cloud companies, what are the valuations that you gentlemen are seeing, and do you think there is, are we seeing things get a little extended?
I think bottom line is bubbles are bubbles, and things are going to get there'll be things that get overvalued at times of bubbles, and there's things that get undervalued at times. We're definitely living in a time for being in the right place at the right time to be overvalued. And I think it started before cloud was called cloud. ZenSource, the virtualization company, was like $500 million with also equally it's a
Ben, do you have a...
yeah, no, I think that it's every sector has its cycle. You look at the back of the dot-com boom, and there was a certain cycle there. There's a lot less behind the dot-com boom in the cloud sector. But the cloud sector, if you look down 5 years down the road, and you're starting a cloud company, if you want to sell that cloud company, you can, but you're going to get normal technology sector revenue multiples. Sorry, because the growth's already out of the cloud. You look a year down the road, the same thing's going to happen. So, the revenue multiples are going to decline. Right now, and I talk to these guys all the time, the guys that are buying IBM, SAP, EMC, they're very hungry for cloud companies because they're getting a lot of pressure from their boards to go cloud, right? Because that's where the action is.
But I think there's two different things you need to acknowledge. The first is, having been an enterprise compute guy for years, it's fun to see our sector inflating. So it's a good thing. So this is not last week, this is like 15 years. Second thing is, and this is the more important, the cloud changes everything. So if you are HP or you're IBM or you're Dell or you're CA, you look into the tunnel and you see the lights coming at you. And things are about to change, not a little bit, but dramatically. This is the death of physical. This is the death of owning data centers. This is the death of IT as we know it. And if that's true, then you got to buy your future, or you become obsolete. or some corporator comes and pulls you apart, or your stock language has become, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but pink sheet. But you have to realize this is the change, because the stuff we're talking about is happening now, and it's transforming enterprises from top to bottom.
So, Quiroz, you were saying before that HP is toast, was that correct?
No, it's opportunity for those companies. I mean,
Well, absolutely. But you know, they're actually slow moving too. That's what I see every day, is that they don't have their strategy set yet. I'm going to ask you another question. That's a good segue. So, at the end of the day, like Verizon is heavily into cloud now, the telco, and you've got a lot of the software providing companies like IBM, HP, et cetera, trying to get into cloud, and IBM is pretty effective. So who's going to win the day here? I mean, telcos have the advantage that cloud computing power is charged on a monthly basis, much like your voice. Voice is just data. Is one way to look at it. So basically, it's a monthly charge for data usage. So telcos should be perfectly primed from a billing perspective to take advantage of the cloud and provide, in addition to voice, data, which they already do, and get in the sector in a very heavy way. And then you have the traditional software providers who do not have that monthly model. They're used to the different software model altogether, not the SaaS. So who's going to win? Who's going to win that battle?
I can start with the telcos, because part of cloud communications is I have to interface to the global telcos through this protocol called SIP to enable you to make a phone call to link to our platforms. And part of our value proposition is that you don't ever need to talk to Verizon, and customers love that. You don't need to talk to BT, you don't need to talk to Singtel, you don't need to talk to a telco again. And the reason they love it is because they've got shocking customer service, and they don't cross geographical boundaries. They've tried dozens of times to be global telcos, and whatever they do, they can't seem to ever do it. So they've tried joint ventures. It might get there, but I don't think a cloud service is global, and their boundaries of BT being a global cloud service or Verizon being a global one doesn't translate well to me in the short term.
So you think the software providers are going to win? So what's your view?
I think aggregators.
Yeah, so I think the industry is going to change. I think we're going to see some interesting mergers and people try to pull some of these sectors together. I mean, I think Terramark in Verizon was somewhat of a step in that direction. Terramark is kind of more of a cloud provider, not a pure telecom, obviously. Yeah. So they are adding a little more of that enterprise experience to a company like them. So I think we're going to see, telecoms swallowing up data center and SIs and kind of vice versa, right? So that's how I think it's going to go.
I think there's going to be a bunch of winners, but they're going to be important. So you can't leave Apple out. Yeah. You got to say Amazon is going to be there taking names, kicking butt. Rackspace is my dark horse favorite. I think they're doing amazing stuff, and with his OpenStack thing. Microsoft, whether you like them or not, they're going to be there. Particularly, they once bought Skype, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't really talked about Skype, but when your telephone call to over there is free, and its quality is acceptable, it's pretty good.
It's not quite free. They charge for it.
But it's pretty much free. So you can go on a list. There's only 10 Vanguard companies are going to reshape the space, but I'm not saying it's some of the hardware box guys at all.
It's really a mischaracterization of what was said about the telcos. I mean, Verizon has already set up cloud facilities for about 3 or 4 years in Hong Kong, Singapore, Europe. They're linked up to Amazon's facilities in Europe. They've got a full cloud facility in the United States even before they bought Terramark. So to say that Verizon is a U.S. and a non-international cloud company, it's totally misleading. And you have the same thing going on with Telstra, with Deutsche Telekom, with British Telecom. They all have cloud facilities all throughout Asia, all throughout, throughout Latin America, throughout Europe, and many of them are sharing things together. Many of these companies have been in the cloud business for about the last 7 or 8 years. Swisscom has dealt with offering large cloud services to many of its biggest, financial or pharmaceutical or consumer business customers
For the purpose
for the
of,
last 7 or 8 years.
have you ever been a member of a telco?
I'm a former consultant to a lot of telcos.
Okay,
You
that's
ever
about
tried
the
to buy
point.
them?
That was my point. They were very well primed for the cloud revolution, just from the monthly billing perspective.
Yeah, how can I add on to it a bit as well? My telco time was a little brief when IBM went to the 9X side, but I do have some there. But I think the question you were trying to ask was about winning the war, right? I mean, I think you're putting out a really big strategic future statement about it. You described a lot of what's led up to the state of where we are in the near future. I think to your point, all the examples you're giving, at the end of the day, from a global market perception scenario, there's a whole series of nimble, agile organizations that have gotten the brand credit for early cloud success. That includes primarily like the names that have been listed. And I think it had frustrated a lot of telcos. Actually, I sat with some execs at IBM that said, we manage more servers in the world than any one of these guys, and we're not getting any cloud credit. What do we have to do to pivot to be bigger in the cloud game? That comment was a few years ago, but they've made a lot of investments in that since then. But it's funny, so one of our biggest customers is one of the biggest telco providers worldwide. It's kind of a competitor of Cisco in China called Huawei. And what I've learned through the interaction with them is how all across the world, the telcos are arming in this space and doing everything they can do to leverage open source cloud platforms and having a competitive game to it. It's a big deal. And I think a lot of what we've talked about today has been enterprise. Like I think everyone's been thinking about the Fortune 100, 500, whatever global big names. If you think about it, a huge amount of cloud usage across the world so far has been a lot of SMB-sized businesses. Right. And telcos have done a phenomenal job servicing SMBs. Not, you made a challenge about the customer service relationship and so forth. I would just say at the end of the day, they've got a billing engine set up that's collecting a lot of money every year from SMBs in every one of these regions. And so that's what I see through my Huawei relationship.
On a monthly basis.
Yeah, on a monthly basis. So, and stepping away from it, I've realized how many competitors Huawei has, that they're all trying to get into this relationship with the telcos to turn those SMB customers for voice and so forth into cloud customers. So, bottom line is, who wins the war? They'll be questionable. I think, to me, the number one challenge that they face is the cultural thing you brought up, and it's this customer service / agility. You love Rackspace so much that what's their tagline? Fanatical support. So it's just there's a different vibe and move that people think of when it comes to this agile kind of business. And I think it's going to be more than just the adoption of agile technology in the telcos and these other businesses. It's going to be the mentality around what's good enough on the technical side, but how do you delight people with the service, the interaction, the agility.
Fantastic. Great. We're going to open it up to audience questions. And just do me a favor, if you could speak loudly and also introduce yourself briefly, just your name and company, that'd be fantastic. Please.
Yeah, hi. John Marks from Area Partners. My question is, you use your analogy with utilities. I've also been in the IT industry for 27 years. So you're going to have your IBM, your HP, your Sun, Cisco with UCS being the engine for the generator at the utility. You're going to have your EMC, IBM, NetApps is your batteries on the side, right? And then you're going to have whatever your telcos, or you didn't mention cable companies, but will be your pipes going in or your wires going out, right? So what happens to, there's going to be some type of disintermediation with the vendors, which you had brought up. But what happens when you get to the point of, I hate my cable company, I hate my utility, and when you get locked in, nobody mentioned risk about being locked into when all these consolidate and you only have one choice. And you'll say, well, the market will take care of that because somebody else will come out with something. And my second follow-up to that is internationally, what happens with data rules where you can't keep rolling and virtualizing, especially through Europe because of privacy concerns?
Yeah, so kind of to answer your first question, I think the lock-in factor, VMware, which is kind of, I'll call it that, is maybe the one that is the most lock-in that I see. But the ability to move an image from one piece of hardware to another, and all that stuff is abstracted with VMware. So I don't necessarily see that as big of a risk for people, right? That they can do that if they want to. It's really just a matter of living out their life cycle on their assets.
Just to emphasize that one of my startups had a bad experience with software on Friday. They were running on Amazon on Monday.
Yeah, switching, it's very easy to switch.
And there are companies out there that are envisioning it. Amazon does this as a business line, but brokering services. So you say, I run multiple points of support. I want more software. I'm going to go out to the market and buy this. All right.
That's what's actually amazing is the elasticity in the sectors, and you can go from one provider to the next in a second heartbeat.
And the traditional cloud pricing is a monthly model,
Right.
and that's the
Right.
whole point. It's gone away from you can buy 2-3 year contracts, but you can. That's the whole point. All these services are monthly.
Yeah. So you do have to differentiate on service, right? So if you're not providing that service, you're going to
You're
lose the
gone.
business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
It's actually getting to be a very commoditized business. That's the other key,
Utility.
because it is monthly. Another question?
We just want data protection.
Oh, data protection. Sorry, please.
So there are companies that map the data and have it quote resident in the national jurisdiction as opposed to, but that's actually the part of compliance. And when you talk with the chief compliance officer of enterprises, that's the piece they've got to manage toward. To not violate the data protection rules. It's an area that's being responded to.
I think one of the last part on your comment, you got answers from an infrastructure as a service perspective, but the thought is on platforms as a service, there's obviously, you're getting deeper in, and so figuring out how you can ensure you can have a flexibility to go from one app engine to another app engine is part of service planning.
Right.
And also when you're working with your SaaS company, what does it mean to ensure that you can get access to the data that you want when you want to go to a different player?
Gregory, John, I'm in the process of forming a mobile payment startup, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on how the cloud might impact the payments industry.
So this device, which we all carry around, this will become the wallet. So
Right.
I'm not sure near-field communication is the response, but this will be the point of purchase and have lots of your information. The mobile payments thing will make it, using the cloud, ever more easier to define an offering around a target group, to customize an offering. It's all the benefits of the cloud. I personally don't understand the mobile payments industry well, so I stay away from it. But.
Right. Okay.
Please.
My name is Mark Freeberg with a company called Frontway. We do disaster recovery business continuity services to the cloud. I have a question about capacity. You talked about cloud as utility and it's scalable and versatile and elastic. I've asked several cloud providers to talk about their capacity. What capacity are they at? And do you see in the future, sort of as a hypothetical question, capacity limitations to from a rack space, not an outage because something failed, but just to hit capacity limits for storage or computing?
Yeah.
And what kind of development?
I mean, from a hosting, I said back 10, 15 years ago, I was hosting, we would be selling rack spaces, predecessors, you'd be selling boxes this big. It would take up huge amounts of electricity. And nowadays, every parameter has gone in the opposite direction. So the electricity consumption has gone down, the CPU has gone massively up, and the space required to virtualize 300 servers has gone down to this amount of room. And so that trend, I don't see changing. I mean, we can do so much more in the same space. We're sort of almost doubling our capacity within the same space. We're actually getting rid of rack spaces because we can virtualize it all. So, I mean, I worry about some of the big data centers that are investing in massive data centers because you can do so much more with less space. I mean, it's great for rack space, they've got the real estate, and they can just deliver double the services out of the same amount of electricity, almost. So
and most of these providers have arrangements, so if they do see, they watch capacity at an aggregate level very closely, and they have arrangements with their suppliers to bring gear in, within hours or days, right? Kind of, let's say, that they can turn up. So they buy it kind of on utility from them and then resell it to you. So they use a little bit of arbitrage there to make sure that they can meet demand. I think most folks have been successful with that so far.
A couple parts to this. One is, if you look at the real estate commercial market growth, the numbers are crazy in regards to how much money's for further investments going into new data center growth. Right now, it's crazy big. So that's one part of it. Another thing I was going to bring up was I did a presentation following the CTO of Amazon once, and somebody was asking him in the crowd in the Q&A like this about his top competition, or how we feel out, as you mentioned, they're such a big dog. And his comment, he put me in a single direct competitor as his competition. He basically just said, our competition is the direct hardware salesman who's trying to put the hardware at the client site. And so if he's right, and let's just say in the end, his point is, there's business for everybody, for all those guys out there, and they can grow beyond belief. The main thing is, just think about, these things are just moving from one place to another. All they're just trying to do is just have, the servers were moving in either case, where are they going to go? And so all this is doing is centralizing who's managing it and where it's going to be managed. So anyway, by the way, from our customer basis of doing this stuff, it's we have the connotation of our back end handling 10,000 servers streaming to us at once, and that's a pod that can handle that. For a provider to stamp out another pod and everything required to take on another stream of 10,000 can be done in hours. Hours. We never get a blink of being able to handle it.
Moore's law in action, right? And in terms of the data, no question. Please.
Where's all this bandwidth coming from?
Can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Barry Tanner. I have my own company, QCG.
The bandwidth, where does the bandwidth come from? Andrew?
The telcos. And that's why they don't make any money, because what they do is that every year they're giving you twice the bandwidth and not charging any more. So their business model, with the greatest respect for the gentleman, is a bit awkward.
I could expand on it. Do the carriers, whomever, have the capacity to accommodate as well as you're seeing?
Absolutely, because all they're doing is lighting up the fibre with the new technology and quadrupling the bandwidth. They've already bought so much fibre around the world that the bandwidth is not a problem.
Yeah, typically the ability to run more data down that fiber doubles, every year or two, I guess. So
LTE, 4G, and then it's going to be 5G, right? That's next.
As I said, the challenge is the telcos, that they have to deliver more bandwidth for no more revenue, yet they're buying this, the fiber endpoints of Cisco and Juniper for, tens of thousands. And so that's a bit of a weird model at the moment, in my view, that doesn't stack up. And that's why the telcos' profits, some telco profits, are tricky in the business
Please, back there.
Hi, my name is Ruth Morris, and I'm standing up because I can't see you, so I figured you would be able to hear me because I'm seated. I was at a meeting today with Amazon, they were talking about their web services targeted to developers and startups. So I can see the whole cloud, for that group. Who are the large corporate enterprises that are moving their data to the cloud?
That's a good question.
So it's really interesting. Because I have this relationship with this firm, Cloud TP, I know a lot about how to respond to that. So Cloud TP was birthed about a year and a half ago, and it was focused on mid-market. Turned out it's nothing but large enterprises. So it's big banks like State Street Bank. It's international firms like Korea Telecom and Samsung. Here in New York, McGraw-Hill and MetLife. These are all customers of Cloud TP. And I can't quite explain exactly why, but maybe you guys can remember. It was November 2010 when the world switched from why do we want to do this to how do we do this? Why do we want to move to the cloud? It was this seminal moment in time where somebody's going to look back and start to write about why. But every large enterprise here in New York and around the country, maybe around the globe, said, I got to get on the cloud bandwagon. And you can't believe who's coming forth. And I know this because I sit in the management meetings. Philadelphia Power and Gas wants a cloud strategy. State of Kansas wants a cloud strategy. Silicon Valley Bank wants a cloud strategy. Apria, which is a healthcare diagnostic company, wants a cloud strategy. I mean, these are names you don't know. I mean, the names I mentioned before you do know. JP Morgan needs a cloud strategy. So every enterprise, I can't say it loud enough, is thinking how to get to the cloud. And it's not just email, it's how they run their business. And they're getting more and more daring because they're asking themselves, well, if we can just reconfigure our value chain, if we can get our partners to work with us, we can leverage some internal skills and reach out to customers, we'll lower our costs, we'll improve our competitiveness. So it is a revolution. It's happening faster than you read about.
Yeah, another big buyer of cloud services and products is the federal government. There's a real huge mandate to decrease costs for their IT services as part of budget deficit reduction, and it's actually they're big, huge buyers right now, which is actually surprising that they're first movers. I don't know if you're Republican or Democrat, but it's always surprising.
Yeah.
Right? Please, right there. Yep.
Hi, I'm Alberto Molina from SureTech.com, and we did software development for 12 years and decided to sell IT solutions based on cloud to $2 to $50 million businesses 2 years ago. And so I'm glad that it's hot, because that's what we're trying to do. Just fundamentals, I wanted to propose a definition for the cloud, because I've always been somewhat unsatisfied with this idea.
You like my step definition?
Location, somewhat unsatisfying. I think, on this side or that side of the firewall, somewhat unsatisfying. I propose that a cloud is an iPad. So an iPad's obviously here, so that sort of sounds not intuitive if you're thinking that the cloud's somewhere else. But I think the cloud is standardized, it's modular, and it's locked. And the way I get to that is I look at an iPad and I look at a PC, and the big difference is you can't fuck up an iPad. People screw up their PCs all day long. And to me, the cloud is that, when you're on Google, you can't screw up Google's Gmail. No matter what you do, you're not going to take down Gmail because you install some whatever. And so to me, the cloud is that it's locked down and it's secure and it's managed in that way. You could have, quote, a cloud solution on your own facility with it. Those are the three. So lockdown, standardized, modular, proposed definition of
like it.
I see that.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please. We have time for one more, I believe. Dick?
I just thought.
Can you introduce yourself, please? Sorry.
Yeah, Dick Reisman Fellowship. I can't resist this amusing, to me, comment. BDN, probably none of you know that abbreviation, but in the late 1970s, speaking of Verizon, there was a thing called Bell Data Network, where the phone companies thought they were going to compete with IBM by introducing basically cloud services driven by their PBX-based computing expertise and their network capabilities, and offer computing services to corporations. And for about a year, they were trying to sell this thing and realized that they couldn't produce it, so now we're finally doing it.
Yeah, I mean, IP Centrex or Centrex.
Yes, Centrex is
30 years ago was exactly that. Yeah. In fact, there was we were talking earlier before the meeting that the telco, one of the telcos I work with in the UK, Cable Wireless, they were the first telegraph. They laid the company that became Cable Wireless was the company that laid the first transatlantic telegraph between India and the US. And when that technology was first deployed in the UK, there was a 20-mile stretch of telegraph that was used between Paddington and London, and it was outsourced to a company who used it to communicate with the police. So you could argue in the 1850s there was a cloud service.
Oh, wow. That's super early. That's amazing.
That's
a very early adopter.
Yeah, but it was a communication outsourced service.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more. If anybody has one more last. Sure, in the back, yeah.
Yes, I'm Reba Beeson, and I have a...
Can you stand up, please?
Sure. I have an investment banking company focused on energy and infrastructure. So my question is, where are the greatest disruptions in this cloud business vis-a-vis industries, whether it be media, we talked about telecom already, energy, power companies themselves, real estate, you touched upon that, but if corporate data centers are moving to the cloud, that frees up space. So does that mean that there's a different, it's just a complete dislocation to a cloud company? Or does that mean that real estate goes away? So where do you find the biggest disruptions?
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, basically which sectors are going to be most disrupted by the cloud?
I'll
That's a deep question.
All speechless in the last question.
I mean, the answer is, it's not the one you're going to want. Every industry is going to be transformed. Every single industry. And the thing that will be disrupted most is innovation is going to accelerate. So just to give an example, I invest in a company called Sunglass.io. For grins and giggles, to go take a look at it. The thing to appreciate is 3D CAD in a browser. 11 guys, $300,000, 12 months. And the quality of the engineering, whether it works as a company or not, I don't know. But the quality of the engineering, what they achieve, they render a Sony Handycam, a Mitsubishi car, you can manipulate, you can spin around, you can add to it, you can delete, you can circle it, is fantastic. And I just use that as a sliver of an example to say, watch out. The world of what you say was not possible will be not only probable, but will happen 5 years from now. So the question is, what do we do to be part of that?
Great, and on that positive note, I think we'll wrap it up. I'd like to